All right, we're here in Roth with a special edition of Coach's Corner because we have a world champion coach to answer all your questions today. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Dan Plews.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're going to throw some real curveballs at you from our audience today and see if you can answer them for us. I don't have to do any work, I just have to read the questions out. Okay, first question. The pro calendar is packed and there are so many events for age groupers too to take part in these days. As a coach, how do you go about balancing an athlete's season and making sure that they stay fit and don't get burned out?
Yeah, good question. I mean, especially if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you often race all year round, so it is a real problem. I mean, I think one of the main things is keeping training interesting is always important, and changing. Like I usually kind of at the start after racing, always taking a bit of a break, a bit of a time off, changing the stimulus, and then and making sure the training is always not too hard. I think people often do too much training load too soon or too much generally, and they make themselves too tired, and then the seasons can be quite short. Building into it gradually. One of the main things that I really try and do with all of my athletes is have a real mid-season break. It's really, really important. So Chelsea, for example, we've had a big build-up to Roth right now. After this, she's going to have a mid-season break, which will be around 2 to 3 weeks of pretty much almost nothing, and then we'll start the Kona build. So I think that's the most important thing. You can't expect to do 365 days of the year of just non-stop training.
Yeah, so there you have it. Keep your baseline manageable. You shouldn't be straining in your baseline. Push for the races and then take mid-season break and you'll be able to get through that whole season. You heard it from the expert. Okay, next question is from Christian Worth and he says, hashtag GTN Coach's Corner. I have a question regarding a recovery week. How would I best go about this if I do not just train to improve, but also because I need the mental health benefits of getting outside, getting my heart rate working hard and having some peace and quiet me time before a stressful work day ahead? What would be the best way to balance between these two opposing wishes? I've just started to mix up the training between running and cycling and run for around 1 hour each day. So
yeah, and I totally understand because I think everyone needs a bit of me time and a bit of training to help. But I think there's two things that I think of when I think of this question. One is I don't really believe in recovery weeks generally. I think that if you need a whole week to recover, you've probably left your recovery period too late. So you've gone in too much of a deeper hole. So generally I believe that you're kind of on a more of a shallow wave than big peaks and troughs. That's how we tend to do it. And obviously HRV, if you're monitoring that, really good tool to know when you need the recovery period. If you're seeing it in your data, take the recovery period sooner rather than later. But then also from a mental perspective, you probably don't need that much training to feel good, right? You know, you can probably do 30, 40-minute run would give you all the endorphins you need. And that can be enough. There's also other things that you can do, like ice bath, for example, has very similar responses to an endorphin response, which gives you a good boost.
For me.
Might not be for some people. But then also sauna as well also gives you a bit of a boost.
That's more my speed. Yeah. So you sit in the sauna instead of going for a run, maybe. Yeah, but that's a good point you make about HRV. You can monitor it these days. Smartwatches, wearables like the Whoop, those kind of things. You can actually track your HRV and you can see that now is the time to have a break, not 2 weeks down the line, because that's when my recovery week was scheduled. So keep an eye on it. Go too deep into a hole, and then you can just keep your mental health going while you actually keep your fitness building. Okay, next question. We don't even have a name here. It's 188352501. Thanks for writing in. Hashtag Coach's Corner. How do I recover after a race? I always seem to need 3 to 4 weeks before I can get back to any kind of training after a race. Ooh.
Yeah, 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, my first question was, I'm assuming this is quite a long race.
We're going to assume that was a long course race.
Yeah,
you need
like
3 to 4 weeks to recover from it.
But I think many people do need quite a long time after an Ironman. But I mean, generally, I think keeping moving is important, not doing nothing. I think maybe straight after the race, take 2 to 3 days of nothing, or very one session a day, but then movement and doing some sort of activity actually aids the recovery process. And of course the normal things that are all really important for recovery: sleep, so making sure you're getting enough sleep; training periodization, so making sure you're not doing too much high intensity. Low intensity training is generally better for recovery, helps improve the HRV, for example, which is a good marker of how well you're recovering; and then appropriate and good nutrition.
Yeah. I think that's a good point that Dan makes there, that training where you might not feel like doing it after a race and you really don't want to get out there, it actually is part of the recovery. Get out there and do some movement, and you might actually find that you feel better and you recover faster. While you're sitting on the couch and you decide, no, I'm still tired from the race, that might be your body kind of stuck in a bit of a holding pattern and not wanting you to get off the couch. Break through that, get out and get moving. You might find you recover a bit quicker than that 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, next question. Sid0484 asks, GTN Coach's Corner, is there any advantage, disadvantage in separating your running and cycling deload week? So again, we've got a recovery week question. Week 1, both hard. Week 2, cycling hard, running easy. Week 3, both hard. Week 4, cycling hard, cycling easy, running hard. Or was it better to do all your hard weeks as hard weeks and then have proper recovery week? And he's already answered this question as far as recovery weeks go, but I guess it works on a smaller cycle too. Running days, cycling days, and then rest days, or should they be combining them for triathletes?
Yeah, I think that if you're going to take a recovery period or recovery week, whatever it might be, it needs to be all 3 modalities, because there's more to it than, I mean, there's obviously a high degree of muscle soreness when it comes to running, so you will be saving some of that, what we call eccentric loading from running, but you still have a lot of like sympathetic drive, autonomic stress from the high intensity exercise that you'll be doing in the harder weeks. So I would, yeah, you definitely want to make sure those recovery periods are swim, bike and run, or a little bit easier. When you're recovering,
the physiological load is what you want to reduce, not just the running load. So yeah, good point there. Okay, last question, and this one is from Samuel Villard, and he says, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Hello GTN, training for half distance races this year, and I can't squeeze more than 7 to 8 hours of training per week. With this, I do not do any zone 2 or easy exercise apart from my weekend long bike ride, which is relatively low intensity. However, I commute to work most days on my road bike, which is in total 2 to 2.5 hours of extra low intensity riding. Does this have any effect in my total training load? And does it count like low intensity exercise or recovery, even if it is 20 to 25 minutes twice a day?
Actually, it does definitely. So I would 100% be including it in the training. I mean, even a small dose of 20 to 25 minutes is better than nothing. And what we know about training is that there's some great work that looks at the molecular signaling of training adaptation. And we know it has a half-life of about 8 hours. So if you're doing frequent bouts of exercise, frequency is often is a really good training stimulus for keeping up the adaptation and the molecular signaling to promote some good improvements.
So maybe even be better to ride in the morning and the evening, short little rides, than ride a big long aerobic ride. But yeah, I think the point is it definitely counts towards your training, towards your low level aerobic training, if you're doing 2 to 2.5 hours a week of riding to get to work and back on top of your 7 or 8 hours of actual training. Beware of doing 7 or 8 hours all hard though. If you're only doing 2.5 hours easy and 7 or 8 hours of hard, you may be getting your balance a little bit off there. You do need to make sure that you are looking after your body. Thanks for the questions everyone, and thank you so much Dan Plews for joining us and helping answer them. Remember, below this video or any of our videos, use the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner and ask your question, and we could be answering it next week on next week's Coaches Corner. Unfortunately, Dan won't be here for that one, but we'll try our best to answer that question for you. Thanks for watching. See you again next week.